Thanks for joining me, Sean. I'm glad you took a little bit of time to join me on this podcast that we've been doing. And I'm welcome to our listeners and our watchers. So thanks for joining us as well. So before we begin, Sean, why don't you just take a moment and begin by introducing yourself and telling everybody a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Jason. Really appreciate you having me on. I was elected to the state Senate in 2022, where I represent District 35 in the center slice of Bismarck. And I think I have to be really nice to you today because I think you're a constituent in District 35. So
sure am. I remember you knocking on my door.
Yeah, I knocked on about 4,400 doors that year, and it was a really great experience. I grew up in Bismarck here, went to DC to work for Senator Hoeven, my first job out of college, moved home after graduate school at UND to work for Governor Burgum, and then now my full-time job is working with the Medora Foundation. So for folks who might be watching on video, behind me I got the Badlands, and we have a pretty great room for video calls and an even better place to be in real life. So a lot of exciting things going on in Medora, and really enjoyed my first legislative session, and looking forward to getting back in the Capitol in January. You'll be here before we know it, I think.
Oh, absolutely. So growing up in Bismarck, at what point did you become interested in politics and say, this is something either I might want to do personally or take you out to working with Senator Hoeven's office?
Well, growing up, my grandma was a state representative in this very similar district to District 35. And so she was always a role model to me growing up, the emphasis that she put on community service and public service. I would have to say getting into politics wasn't necessarily my plan. I interned for Senator Hoeven because I saw a flyer on the career service bulletin board at UMary, and then they offered me a job 4 months later in DC. So I kind of fell into that part of it by accident as an adult, but really got hooked on it. And then when I moved home and met my now wife and started a family in Bismarck, the opportunity for serving in the state Senate in my district became available, and decided to throw my hat in the ring.
Yeah, that's interesting. So my great grandfather was a state representative. Obviously Dick Dever. So he's like my great uncle. So we've got a shared relative who predates us in the North Dakota political scene. But growing up, I loved politics. It was probably I was on the nerdier portion of that spectrum. But it's still weird how careers take you, because I didn't work in politics right out of high school or college or anything. So it took me some time to get back to where, if you would have described this job to me when I was in high school, I thought that's really cool. Or, being in the state legislature was something that I thought was really an interesting concept. So it's just interesting how life takes you where it takes you. And now that you're there in the legislature, what are the types of things that you focus on in your legislative time?
Well, what really motivated me to run is that sometimes I think in the legislature we're missing out on perspectives of younger professionals, of younger folks with families. We have a lot of great perspectives in the legislature. I've learned a lot from my colleagues, have a lot of really great mentors, but I am the youngest one in the state Senate. I just turned 32 a few months ago. And, we have two kids at home, a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old. And that's been a real blessing. And, I know North Dakota is a place that I want to live and raise my family, and the challenges that come with having a young family and daycare. Right now, actually, we don't even have childcare available until May. And,
Wow.
When I think of young graduates who love the state and want to stay here, making sure that the things that are happening in the state capitol are things that are making it easier for folks who want to stay here and raise a family and find a good job, as opposed to harder. So, like I said, my first job out of school was out in DC, and I love that experience too, working for Senator Hoeven. He's a great guy to work for. I think he's doing a lot of great work on behalf of the state. But living in DC and working in DC, I think one lesson I took away from that was that we can't always be looking to DC to solve our problems. And so running for the state legislature, I feel like I've really had to have gotten to dig right in on a lot of issues that are really important to the future of the state and making sure it's a place that folks always want to live and work.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned that about North Dakota solutions versus DC solutions. So my son is a freshman at Utah State University, and one of the classes he's taking is a political science class. So he and I will talk for a long time. And, we were talking about just the constitutional structure, like how that helps us solve problems and what people call this political gridlock, and what you see and what I see is we've really moved so much power in Washington, D.C. into the administrative agencies that it's hard for legislators to solve problems because they've given the power away to administrative branches, and you're not voting on any bill, you're voting on packages of bills. Mm-hmm. So what do you like about North Dakota's political process? Having seen the federal process close up, what are the strengths that you see at the local North Dakota level?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple that I think are make it function a little better here in North Dakota. The first being what you described. Here, although we are a part-time legislature, and that does lend some balance of power to, I think, the executive branch in some ways. Being a smaller state and having a little bit more accessibility, I think, makes it a lot easier for those sorts of decisions to be responsive to concerns that individuals or associations have. If there's something that's going wrong, it's in DC. I felt like sometimes it'd be, especially if it was an administration that wasn't friendly to what you were trying to do, you would send them a letter and maybe you would hear back 4 months later, or maybe never at all. Yep. Maybe if there was an oversight hearing, you'd have a chance to bring up some points there, but there was nothing that they would necessarily have to do to listen to you, because when there's a divided Congress, they know that there's not going to be much pressure from the legislative branch on the administration. Whereas here, I guess I'm especially biased because I live in the district that has the capital, but the folks who are in government are right down the block from me. And you guys as well. I think actually the Lignite Council is in the middle of town right there in District 35. And so it's a lot easier to just get folks in the same room to work through some of these problems. And that you have the opportunity to address the issue. Whereas in DC, it just gets bogged down so much, and it makes kind of having these more thoughtful or nuanced conversations a lot more difficult, just because there's a lot of inertia and a lot more politics. It's here, it's just easier to get everyone together, talk through what's working, what's not working, and what we can do as a state to move things forward.
So I'm curious, we have great opportunities for engagement at the local level. What's the population's level of engagement? Do you hear from constituents? It feels like a fairly political engaged area, and I'm curious if you see the same thing from constituents.
Yeah, definitely. It's all sorts of things, and I think part of that might be that we're in the capital city. I get a lot of issues that are directly related to state government, and some issues certainly become higher profile than others when we're in the legislature. But part of that too was during the campaign season, like I said, knocking on all those doors, talking to all those people. Really great way to learn what's top of mind for voters. And it was actually really special for me. I don't know if I've ever told you about this, but in May of 2022, I wasn't able to make it out to the events for the sale of Coal Creek to Rainbow Energy. But later that day, knocked on someone's door who worked there, and it was just a really, really special thing. Even though I wasn't even in the legislature yet, it's well, the things that are happening in the Capitol really matter. And this gentleman, it's this job's paid his mortgage, has sent his kids to college, and has really contributed to his life and our community in a big way. And to me, that was just directly related back to the work that I'm now doing in the legislature. And yeah, it's great. The main reason we're there is to represent our constituents, and we have a really engaged group of people in Bismarck, and it makes it easier for me to do my job well. We're a citizen legislature. We're not experts, but when we hear from people who are impacted by what's going on in state government, it it helps us to do our job better too.
Yeah. Oh, totally. So, we've talked a little bit about our industry. Generally speaking, what is your thoughts on energy policy or philosophy in energy for policymakers?
Well, I know this phrase is coming maybe less in vogue than it used to be, but I truly do see myself as a all of the above energy proponent. I want to see more folks investing in North Dakota, whether it's traditional fuel sources. I think there is a role for renewables, but the work that's being done by your organization, the Lignite Council, I think the members that you represent are really that should be viewed as kind of the base of that reliable base load electricity. That without that, those other things just, in my opinion, wouldn't function as well. So when I think of, I guess when I view energy policy, I just view it from a common sense perspective. We shouldn't penalize the things that work well, and when there are things that maybe we're moving in a different direction, technology is changing, we can view those things as ancillary, that we're building on this base that we have, but we shouldn't forget that the sources like coal, like natural gas, form the base of that for us to be able to access these other forms of energy as well. So I do get a little concerned sometimes that some of the policies, especially coming out of DC, kind of put the cart before the horse, that if we try to move all this direction towards renewables, which again, I think there is some role for, that if we get it switched around, the system's just not going to work for energy reliability, and it's not going to work for people who are trying to afford to keep their lights on, and for businesses to do the same.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, you talk about the phrase all of the above, and it is changing a little bit in the connotation, but it remains the best way to do things, which is a true all of the above policy and not lip service only, which is, I think, where you get people now who will say all of the above, but what they really mean is all of the above that I choose.
Yeah.
And, go down a certain road. But the ability of North Dakota to have what is one of the true all of the above opportunities, because we truly can provide a lot of different energy resources to the mix. But also, you see this, that we are an energy intensive state for a lot of different reasons. One of the reasons is we produce things, and it takes energy to produce things. And whether that is producing fuel and oil and gas, whether that's food for the world, it is an energy intensive state. And the lessons that we learn in an energy intensive state can be applicable to those folks outside as well. So it's it's never an easy conversation to describe energy policy to folks who aren't up on it. But having lived here in North Dakota and followed North Dakota's energy policy, and also you've seen the world in Washington, D.C., you drive through the parts of North Dakota that are producing energy on your way to work. What would you tell those people outside of North Dakota about North Dakota's energy resources and energy outlook?
I think I would just kind of repeat what I said sort of in the middle there, in that we can't get away from things we know work. We've had reliable baseload electricity from sources like coal, like natural gas. We have, obviously a great oil and gas sector in this state that does a lot to power the American economy. And especially the further you get from places like North Dakota, I feel like it gets lost on some folks that we have these natural resources that really form the foundation of not only our ability to produce energy, but our ability to power our economy. And that when we have these rules and regulations that come out of DC that sort of flip that around, we potentially jeopardize our ability to use these natural resources in a way that form the foundation of this power generation and the baseload of our economy. You can't regulate yourself into prosperity or into energy production. Eventually the bill is going to come due, and So when we think of sustainability over the long term, the more we keep people focused on that we have these natural resources that we're able to develop in an environmentally sustainable way, I think the better off consumers are going to be, the better off workers are going to be, and the better off our economy is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an interesting question because for me, I think I know the answer, but I also am in the middle of the industry. So, as a policymaker in North Dakota, do you see places where energy policy intersects with the rest of North Dakota's policy mix? Is there this awareness within the policymakers of North Dakota's energy mix and policies?
Well, I think you could make an argument that our energy policy touches just about everything else that we do.
I was hoping you'd say something like that, because that's what I see.
When I think of issues that are important to me, pocketbook issues, kitchen table issues, a huge part of that is what it costs for people to power their homes, what sort of costs they're paying for energy to fill their car up or power their car, and what kind of jobs that they have. When you look at like what we were talking about at the very beginning, not only just in traditionally coal producing counties, but now kind of proliferating throughout the state, these high paying jobs. These are jobs that folks can support their family on, that their taxes that they're paying go right back into the community and to help pay for their schools and their roads and support their nursing homes and their hospitals. A lot of the work I do in the Capitol is on the Human Services Committee, which probably doesn't come up a ton in the energy sector conversations, but to me, they go hand in hand because we have the ability for folks, these programs that we're providing for vulnerable citizens are being funded because we have an economy that's functioning well, that people are paying taxes into. And when we have an economy where folks have opportunity to work and have a good paying job and provide for their families, a lot of the issues that we end up having to address in the Human Services Committee can be addressed in other ways when we have this kind of stable economy that folks can provide for themselves, provide for their family. To me, that's better than any government program that we're going to come up with. And there's a great role for those too, but we need to get first things first to make the other things work well too.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I went to NDSU, so from 94 to 98. And, even up until the early 2000s, there was this outflow of North Dakota human capital. And I'm sure you've talked about that and are aware of that. But, think of your job on the Human Services Committee in those days when the economy was not booming, when the population was growing, and you were looking at a shrinking workforce to support a aging population. That was a demographic challenge. And so we're in the middle of maybe of a generation that ought to embrace the opportunities that the energy industry has provided to North Dakota and, at least provide a contrast to the way it was a couple decades ago when didn't have the luxuries that we had now as far as being able to fund some of these things or even take creative approaches to some of them. So
definitely.
So what do you see from your place there in the legislature as the greatest challenges for North Dakota's future?
Well, I think there's two things. We've talked a little bit about what's coming out of DC, and I don't really even consider myself that partisan of guy, but I have to say I do get frustrated when we have to deal with some of these things like the Biden administration, and we saw things under the Obama administration, these policies that come out that make it harder for energy producers to do the work that they're positioned well to do, to keep costs low, to have reliable energy, to provide for good paying jobs. So I do think that, in this case, politics does matter. Who's elected to the presidency and who fills these administrative spots and the makeup of Congress. I think Democrats have been pretty clear. The overwhelming majority of their party, I should say, has been pretty clear about how they feel about some of these traditional fuel sources. So I think that's something we're always going to have to be mindful of, and something that I'm grateful that we have a congressional delegation that keeps our energy sector top of mind in what's going on in DC. But beyond that, there is a shift going on outside of the borders of North Dakota and other states like ours, where there is more of a demand for energy that's less carbon intensive, and so part of that, whether we like it or not, is if there's consumers who are looking for a lower energy sources that have a lower carbon footprint, we should position ourselves to sell that to them. We don't get to choose necessarily what our customers want. If someone says they want a Coke, you can't just give them a Diet Coke and say, here, be happy. So, there is this big change on the consumer standpoint that I guess you could say that government is influencing as well in a certain sense. But if consumers want something that has a lower carbon footprint, in this case, I think North Dakota, we should position ourselves to be able to sell that to them. And so that's where something like all the carbon capture investment that we're making, I think plays an important role, because if that's what consumers outside of this state are looking for, we should be able to position ourselves in a way to sell that to them and continue the success that we've had in our energy sector. So there's the government side of it, but then I also think there's a private sector side that we need to be prepared to adjust for as well.
Well, and there's this quote, that today's generals always fight yesterday's wars, right? And you see that a little bit, that and we have to consciously and deliberately make sure we're not falling into the trap of fighting yesterday's energy battles today, because part of that recognition is, yesterday's energy battles included really a Washington, D.C. directed anti-carbon focus. That still exists to a large degree, but the battle to a large degree has shifted to what you just referenced, which is you could change every policy you wanted in Washington, D.C., and there would still be a significant block of people who will never want to buy a coal electron or a natural gas electron. And that we have to figure out how to live in that world. So I think you're absolutely right that there's an opportunity there, but we have to face that challenge and get there. So I guess flip side of that question would be, what are the opportunities facing our state?
Oh, well, I mean, the opportunities I think we have are endless. And this is something I've really appreciated about Governor Burgum's tenure as governor, is he really is good about reemphasizing that we should have this abundance mindset, that we shouldn't always be focused on that we just need to kind of get through, and that we have all these sorts of opportunities, to come back to natural resources. We are just blessed with this lignite coal, these oil and natural gas resources that other states would be tripping over themselves to have. You look at our ability to produce energy compared to South Dakota. Our economy, I think, is twice the size practically. Our ability to fund state services is almost double compared to theirs. So
that's a big deal.
Yeah, when there's things that I think we really have to be mindful of that could harm that. At the same time, between the sort of research that we have going on at the EERC and things being done at the Industrial Commission to support the energy sector, combined with this great head start that we have these resources here, we have tremendous opportunity to continue the sort of work we've been doing, continue to provide all the things we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, these good paying jobs, reliable electricity. I think there's plenty in the news over the last couple of years that would reinforce the need for reliable energy. That we can't have blackouts, that we can't have folks wondering if their lights are going to turn on, or if it's cold, that their heat's going to work. So it's going to be more important than ever going forward. And I think we're really well positioned with the sort of things we've been setting up at the state level to continue to harness these resources in a way that benefits everyone, not just in North Dakota, but nationally too. We play a huge role. We punch way above our weight for a state our size on the national level.
Very true. Very true. Concluding thoughts. Tell us I'm curious about your day job too, because it's one of my favorite places in the world is out there in Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and that area is amazing. So just tell a little bit about what you're doing out there and things that are happening.
Yeah, we're really excited about what's going on in Medora. My day job is in development. I help fundraise for a lot of the things that we are doing to make Medora a better place for our visitors. So like you said, we have about the best home field advantage we could have with the Theodore Roosevelt National Park just north of town. But we have our Medora musical with a lot of exciting changes coming this summer. We're building a rodeo grounds or an upgraded rodeo grounds west of town over by our campsite to be able to host
Yeah.
kind of premier rodeo events. I'm really excited about a shooting range that we're going to be opening east of town for clay pigeon and sporting clays and that sort of thing, which we do have the Bully Pulpit Golf Course, which is one of the best golf courses in the state. I can't really golf that well, so I'm excited to have the shooting range there that I can finally do something that I can be competitive at. But it's an exciting place. We have a lot of exciting things on the horizon. Obviously, the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library is under construction, and it's been a really special place to work. And I'm really excited about the things on the horizon. And the energy sector, including coal and lignite, has been some of our biggest supporters, and those are communities that we serve. Those folks come and take their families to Medora and take in everything that we have to offer. And it's like we talked about, having the jobs in North Dakota, that's important, but having places like Medora where folks can go and enjoy, the beauty of Western North Dakota with their families, I think is a huge part of making our state a great place. And it's a really special thing to be part of working here every day.
I mean, one of our favorite things to do is, at Sully Creek Campground. So we'll go down there, probably June is the best time, but put your kayak in there and then you can float down. Then you can get out in the town and grab lunch, get back in, and then, we'll camp at that south unit campground. So, all told, you're probably 3 hours in the kayaks with a break there to eat lunch. And it's just like one of the greatest things you could do. That experience is unlike anything else you do in North Dakota, but like very few other places in the country give you that kind of scenic experience. So it's an amazing place, and excited for the things that are happening there.
For sure. Anytime, Jason. I really appreciate it. And thanks again. Hopefully see you around here soon. Good luck with the radio show too.
Thanks. Take care. We'll see you.